All right, this is our first time on Facebook Live. I'm Quinn with Brandie Piper. We do a podcast called Royal Dish, which you can find anywhere you get your podcasts. This is the first time we've done this. We've been recording our podcast for a long time, Brandie, but this is the first time we're going to do Facebook Live for just part of an episode that will drop on Friday. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's our review of The Crown, Season 3.
It's a big deal.
It's spectacular. Okay, huge spoiler alert time. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, you are going to want to stop right now and go do something else because we are going to totally review this.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
I thought it was fantastic.
Me too. I would go so far as to say spectacular.
Yeah, I think they've really amped up the drama from seasons 1 and 2. And I think I mentioned this in a previous episode where when they recorded the first 2 seasons, they didn't know if it was going to be a success or not. They recorded them back to back, and then it was released. And I think now, knowing how popular it is, they've really taken the time to make sure that it's entertaining as well as historic.
Well, and I think, correct me if you think I'm wrong, even the production values have been stepped up a huge step. Like, I think the camera shots are more beautiful. The light, I don't know. It just, everything seems richer.
Yeah, and that's saying something because each episode is like its own movie. And I thought that about seasons 1 and 2, but you're right. I think the cinematography is just way better than it was even before. The colors, like, I think how they're shooting it is different. And they're,
Yes.
like the colors are very saturated, I guess, compared to the first 2 seasons.
Yes, and I really get that feel of the era as well. So this is the 50s into 60s? Is this the early 60s?
It's 1967.
Oh, that's right. So, yes, because Winston Churchill has died and Lyndon Johnson is president.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're, the cars, the settings, the sets, I just feel like you're in the 60s. It's really well done.
I love it so much. So what episode are you on now?
I'm in the middle of episode 5. My husband is a bigger Crown fan than I am, if that's even possible, but he would watch them all in one sitting if I let him. And I keep saying, you really need to savor them and, don't watch too many at once. Don't you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but I think in the past I've binged them in one weekend, and it's just a lot to take on because each episode's an hour long, and you kind of forget what happens when you're constantly thinking about the next thing that's happening. So, no, I think you're right. It's best to savor it and digest each episode and
I think
reflect on it.
Well, the other thing is it all starts to run together because
Mm-hmm.
I found, so I'll admit we watched the first 4 episodes in one day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon on Sunday. And I did feel like it had run together a little bit until when I was getting ready for the podcast, I started making a list of all the episodes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really helped me, sort of organize them in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
that makes sense.
yeah, so there's 10 episodes, and like you say, they each run an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think how long it takes to make 10 hours of
right.
something on that scale.
Yes, I totally agree. And to pull it off so beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we've gushed all about The Crown being back, it's on Netflix, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
dropped on Sunday. Let's talk about our 3 favorite things from the first 2 episodes. So just like whatever 3 things just really blew you away.
Okay. Well, do we want to talk about the central themes of each episode?
Oh, let's do it.
Okay, so the first episode is called Olding, and it focuses on Winston Churchill's death, the suspicion that Prime Minister Harold Wilson is a Soviet spy, and the arrest of Anthony Blunt, who was the surveyor of the Queen's pictures. And then the second episode was called Margaretology, and it centered on kind of the juxtaposition of Princess Margaret and Queen Elizabeth's personalities. And what I kept thinking about during that episode is how different Britain and the world would have been if their birth orders had been flipped and Princess Margaret was queen. I mean,
Yes.
It would be a completely different world.
I agree, yeah. And maybe, obviously, a completely different monarchy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I wonder if it would be as strong as it is today. She's just a very strong personality,
Mm-hmm.
don't you think?
Oh, yeah. and she behaved very differently from Queen Elizabeth. So the times when Elizabeth showed restraint, I don't think Margaret would have done the same thing.
Right. I loved in Margaretology, the second episode, where they did the flashbacks to when they were children.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if this was embellished, because what happens in the episode is Margaret has a conversation with Elizabeth saying, I know by birth you're supposed to be the next monarch, but I want to do it. I'm better equipped to do it. I'm the better personality. You're way too quiet and reserved. And Elizabeth agrees. Did you see this?
Yeah.
And so then Margaret said, and they both agree. Margaret says, let's go tell them. Let's go tell, the senior
The people in charge. Yeah.
courtiers. Right. And Margaret does, and then leaves the room crying, because you know what they said to her. It's never going to happen. I mean, this all follows very strict protocol. And I thought, I wonder if that actually happened. And even if it didn't, I bet there was an element of that in their relationship.
I think so. Yeah. But I also wonder if part of Elizabeth's personality was formed based on the assumption that she would be queen, because her dad became queen when she was like a preteen. And so she knew from an early age that what her destiny was going to be. So I wonder how much that had an impact on who she became. Like, if she realized the magnitude of this and thought, oh, wow, like, this is who I have to become.
In order to survive
Right.
this, and for everything to survive as it... I think, you know what my impression is? For some reason, she has more of a sense of responsibility to upholding the traditions, and I wonder if Margaret might have been more open to, trying new things.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and you read the book on Margaret, so didn't you? read the book
Yeah,
on
I'm
Margaret?
almost done. It's hard for me to get through this one.
Really?
But just the style of it. So it's called 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret. And I guess it would be classified as biography, but it's these short little stories about things that happened to her in her life, but they're all kind of out of succession. So you're kind of jumping around from like childhood to adulthood and then back to childhood. And it paints a very interesting picture of who she was and the kind of personality she had. I think of her less favorably now after reading most of it. But yeah, I'll give it to you next.
Okay. I'd love to read that. So yeah, I thought that first episode, Olding, I thought was excellent, but Margaretology, I love that.
What I picked up from both of those, the first episode seemed more historical and more educational, whereas the second episode was just more entertaining, because we saw Helena Bonham Carter portraying Princess Margaret, and the episode really just kind of focused on her and Elizabeth. And yeah, I loved it so much.
Yeah, I know. I love Helena. And what about our friend Olivia Colman? What do you think?
I think she's great. I'm surprised at how many people seem to prefer Claire Foy over Olivia Colman. I think Claire did a wonderful job. I love them equally. But I think if you would have put Claire in makeup and tried to age her by 20 years, I don't think it would have had the same effect. For me, I like seeing Olivia, even though it's a different person, because it just gives that authenticity as to the era and who she was at that time. And I think there was enough time between seasons 2 and 3 where I kind of forgot all of the things that Claire did to make the Queen her own character. And so I didn't go back and watch season 2 recently. So I think for me, it was an easier transition than for some of the people who went back to like refresh themselves as to like where we were in time.
Right.
And didn't you say Jim is having a hard time with Olivia as the Queen?
Yeah, my husband, he, I think he really liked Claire Foy in that role, and he feels like Olivia is just, not bringing enough dimension somehow, but I think that's how the Queen is.
Yes.
She's just super reserved, super unemotional. I think, she's doing a great job.
Right.
Did you see Olivia Colman in The Favourite?
I haven't.
She's spectacular in that, but that Queen was a totally different Queen. I mean, so I just love this so far.
So
It's been great. And you love the new Prince Philip.
Yes, I thought he did a fantastic job. I feel like he probably looks a little more like Philip than the first one did. Yeah, and we haven't seen a whole lot of him in the first 2 episodes, but I think the scenes he's in really portrays who I have always thought Philip to be.
So wait till you get to episode 4.
Oh.
Because he's in it a lot. And
Oh,
I won't
okay.
say anything because I don't want to ruin it for you.
Okay.
Although we're ruining 1 and 2 for everybody watching this Facebook Live. But you will love it.
Oh, I'm so
I
excited.
know. It's so good.
I'm going to try to get through the next 2 episodes tonight.
Okay, good.
And then,
We
yeah.
can talk about those.
Yes. Okay, so now we should
our
get
3
to our
favorite things.
Yes.
Okay. You go first.
All right, so I'll start with Helena as Princess Margaret. She's brilliant and funny and spot on with what I've read so far in 99 Glimpses.
Totally agree. She's also my number 1.
Oh.
How can she, I mean,
Right.
she just brings that character alive. She brings the tension in the relationships that she had with everyone around her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think it pulls any punches. Like, it doesn't make her seem crazy or, you know, which I thought was very respectful. But you can definitely tell that she has a much different temperament.
Yes.
And she loves to have fun.
Oh, yeah.
She loves the partying. You know, and Helena is just killing it with her portrayal of her.
She's like the fun relative, like Mike Tyndall
Yes.
is right now, but she was that for the family, 50 years ago.
Yes. And you know, what I really get when I watch Helena portray her is she has nothing to lose.
Right.
Like, that totally keeps coming to me, and I think, well, that's because she's doing such a great job, you know, portraying that character.
Yeah. And how about that first scene that she's in? I think it was actually in the first episode where she's lying in bed and the maid walks in and she's like, "Who are you?" That was just so spot on. Again, like
Yes.
with what I've read about her, I thought that was really funny. And it also makes me wonder, did that actually happen? I could see it happening.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure things like that happen.
Mhm.
Yeah. Or, you know, worse.
Right.
How the servants are treated. Okay, should I go with my number
Yes.
2?
What's your number 2?
John Lithgow as Winston
Mhm.
Churchill in the first episode. I know he was only briefly in that episode, but I just love his Winston Churchill. He just, he's laying in a bed because basically he's dying, but he just brings this presence that's like, I could just watch him all day.
He's so good in that
Yeah.
role. I love him so much. Okay, so my number 2 is connected to Princess Margaret again, but it's the end of the second episode when who was the guy who was telling Elizabeth, like, recapping Margaret's visit to the White House? I can't remember who that guy was.
Charteris, or what is his name?
Oh,
She has
was that
3,
him?
I don't know. She has those 3 advisors.
Right.
And I don't even know how to pronounce that guy's name. Wasn't it? It was one of her advisors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's telling Elizabeth about Margaret's visit to the White House, and he says, "This then led to a drinking contest, which in turn led to a limerick contest, or a dirty limerick contest." So I started Googling, which is what I do every time I watch The Queen. And Princess Margaret's official biographer told Vanity Fair that there's no evidence this actually happened during her visit to the White House, and that this is one of those things that was done for entertainment for the show. But it sounds like it's something that she probably did, maybe not at the White House, but maybe at one of her own dinner parties.
Right, I agree.
Mhm.
And you know, Lyndon Johnson has, there are some tapes out, his presidential tapes.
Mhm.
Did you listen to any
Yes,
of them?
so
And some of them are quite crude. Like, he didn't mince words, you know. He was a tough guy.
I had no idea until you mentioned that, and I Googled it and I found a snippet on YouTube from the History Channel, which talked about some of those tapes. So it was like 7 minutes long, and it just kind of touched on a few of them. And the one that I just found the most amusing was when he was trying to get free haircuts for him and his family. I'm like, what?
Right. Or his pants fitted.
Right.
There was also tapes on that. I mean, it's just hilarious. Yeah. Really good. Really good. And, you know, I can see Princess Margaret and Lyndon getting together. I can definitely see them having some fun.
Right.
Like, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what was your third favorite thing?
My third favorite thing was Prince Philip.
Okay.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. His character is bringing so much more, I think, to the series, to the, each episode, much more than it did for me in the first two seasons. Why did I feel like he was a little bit of a sub character?
Yeah.
Even when he was being featured so prominently, there was just something missing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, wow, whatever that is not missing anymore.
Yeah, I read that they had a really hard time casting the role for Philip this time, and that was kind of what took so long between seasons 2 and 3, because they had Olivia Colman in mind from the start, but then they were like, all right, who are we going to get for Philip? And they had a lot of trouble, but I think it was worth the wait. They made the right decision. Tobias Menzies, I think, is the actor.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's perfect.
Great.
And so that's actually my third favorite as well. I feel like this happens all the time.
It does. That's okay. We haven't talked about this ahead of time, by the way.
But specifically at the end of episode 2, when Philip is trying to make Elizabeth feel better about Margaret being the fun, dazzling one, he says something to Elizabeth and finishes with, "You dazzling cabbage," which is what we've talked about before.
Being his nickname for her.
So I thought that was adorable.
I love that too. I know.
And it was so surprising. Like, he just kind of like said it, and I was half paying attention. I'm like, wait a second, did you just call her a cabbage? And then I rewound and
I think maybe that's it. In those first 2 episodes, he was acting like a child, and now he seems much more like a balance to her.
Yes.
Like, okay, maybe this is going on, but you're doing a great job. Like, I feel there's maybe less tension between them, and I felt super uncomfortable about all that tension, which Elizabeth handled great in the first 2 seasons, but I just like their sort of...
And maybe that was part of how he was supposed to portray the character, because they were younger, they were newly married, and in that time, the man was usually the head of household, and he had to figure out how to be okay with playing second fiddle to the queen.
Right.
Which is,
I can
that's
totally
weird
see
for
that.
anyone, yeah. Okay, so now we want to talk about 3 things that we learned from these 2 episodes, because they're filled with, they're both filled with a lot of dramatic license, but I think there's also a lot of history that we can learn from both of them too. So
I totally agree.
Do you want to start with yours?
So I thought that in episode 1, the Prime Minister being suspected of being a Russian spy, or at least not having honorable intentions in his role as Prime Minister. And I wasn't aware that, was it between Churchill and Wilson that the other Prime Minister died I should have looked that up.
Didn't they show
the Prime
that
Minister in between, did they?
Last season?
I'm not remembering it.
At the end of it? I remember there being like a hospital scene and...
Right. And so they almost make a veiled reference to it being under, it was so fast, like suspicious circumstances. But
I don't think he was a prime minister. He was. He was like a friend or an associate of the guy, and and so I guess he could have been the next prime minister, and then because he died, Harold Wilson became the favorite.
Right. You're right. But he was like a real senior political figure.
Yeah,
I don't understand that parliamentary system.
Neither do I.
I wish I did. I know. In any event, so we had our own version of that in the U.S. with the McCarthy era and all the, sort of suspicions about who's a communist and who isn't. Yeah. And I guess I had no idea that Britain dealt with its own version of that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Totally flipped me into that. I loved the scene where the Queen basically apologizes to him, and he goes, "For what?" And she goes, "You don't need to know about that, but I'm sorry." I loved it. I'm like, I'm going to remember that. It's such a great tactic. I'm sorry for something I did. You don't need to know. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that specific line, but I might go back and look for it. Is it toward the end?
No, they were at that gallery.
Oh, yeah.
The gallery unveiling. Yeah. And she has a private moment with him off to the side.
Oh.
They're in the gallery.
Yeah.
But she's like, I had you all wrong. I thought you were somebody, you're not that person. I apologize. And he's like, what are you talking about? So like, never mind, you don't need to know.
Okay, so mine was learning all about Anthony Blunt. So,
Yes.
I had heard the story before about how there was a Soviet spy working in Buckingham Palace. What I didn't know when I started Googling this guy again was that he worked for MI5 from 1941 to 1945 and passed nearly 2,000 documents to the Soviets. So he was hired by Buckingham Palace during that time. He was with the intelligence services as the surveyor of the king's picture, so her father's employee, I guess. And the royal family loved him. He became a knight. He was knighted by them, or by the queen, I guess. I don't know if it was by the queen or by the king. But once the intelligence services figured out that Blunt was a Soviet spy in 1964, they offered him immunity in exchange for a confession and promised to keep the entire thing quiet because they didn't want to damage their reputation. So it's spot on with the storyline within the episode. And it was really interesting do you remember the end of the episode when Philip is talking to him and Philip says something about you need to just go away, but he's stronger language. And Anthony Blunt mentioned something about the Profumo affair and oh, don't worry about those pictures. It would be a shame if they got out.
Right.
So there's no evidence that actually happened, but I guess a lot of historians believe that Blunt may have actually helped helped Philip avoid public embarrassment.
Wow.
So then I started looking at the Profumo affair because I didn't know anything about that, and I feel like there was so much packed into that episode that they didn't even get into because they could have done 3 more episodes on
I agree.
the affair.
I totally agree. Yeah. It was so well done. And history is told in such a dramatic and compelling way that you're just waiting for the next thing and you forget this stuff actually happened. Yeah, it was really good.
How did she work with that guy, with Blunt, for so long, knowing that he was a Soviet spy? That's incredible. And they kept it quiet until Margaret Thatcher outed him during a speech to the House of Commons in 1979. And so we won't see that in this season because it ends in 1977, I think. But I mean, it could have still been a secret if she wouldn't have made that speech.
Yes, exactly. So another historic thing I loved is the portrayal of the Queen Mum and how I feel like the Queen Mother is she's just this reminder of the past there, and they weave her in so well. I just really have loved seeing her.
I would like to see more of her.
Yeah, you will.
Oh, okay.
But she, you can tell she knows everything that's going on and more, but she's just like this bubbly, sort of grandmotherly figure. And I wonder how all those women got along under that roof. That's a lot of star power all living together. And I think we talked about this. I think she did spend the Queen Mother time away at her own estate.
Oh, yeah,
Remember
Castle of May.
Yes.
Yeah, up in Scotland.
Yes, and I wonder if it was because all being in Buckingham Palace or Windsor or wherever was so intense.
And suddenly your daughter is in charge in the position that you held when your husband was alive. That would be hard for any mom. You have to curtsy to her.
Yeah. I love that past that she brings to what's going on currently.
So do I. Especially because I don't know a lot about her. I haven't read a lot about her, so I like seeing her in the show, seeing glimpses into who she is. So the second thing that I put down for things that I learned was Princess Margaret and Lord Snowden's American Vacation. So the Vanity Fair has a great article recapping the entire vacation, and I thought this was really interesting. So the article says that throughout their travel within the United States, they traveled on a small plane that was not large enough to equip Princess Charlotte and their entourage, which was only 8 people, and all of their luggage. So they had 50 pieces of luggage. So each time they traveled to a different city, the plane would take them and then go back and then pick up all of their luggage and then fly them back.
Did you see that shot with all the luggage in it?
Yes.
And there was just like boxes and boxes. I mean,
oh my gosh,
dozens of boxes.
I mean, I guess when you're a princess, you can travel with however much stuff you want, but somebody else can carry it for you. That's great. But then The article also says that Princess Margaret's people would contact the hotels that they were going to stay at ahead of time and give them a list of the things that Margaret and Tony do and don't like. So the likes,
I love this.
the likes were fruit and tea and 2 specific brands of cigarettes, and the dislikes were oysters and champagne. But I feel like Princess Margaret's a champagne kind of gal, so I wonder if it was just like on this trip I'm not feeling like champagne this time, or
she
if
always
that was
had
just
hard liquor in her
that's
highball
true.
glass.
Yeah, maybe she was a
I don't
whiskey
know what
girl.
it was. We'll have to figure that out.
And then during the trip, they met all kinds of celebrities, including Julie Andrews, Mia Farrow, Jimmy Stewart, Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, and tons of other people.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that part of it too. Yeah, learning about that. So my third historical thing was and I'm going to maybe get the number wrong, but the 100,000 pound bailout
Yes!
that the U.S. gave to, I had no idea.
Neither did I. And I wish they would have given a little more detail into that, because it's something
Yes.
I would like to learn about. I guess I can research it myself, but it would have been nice to see more of that.
Yes, I agree. And I didn't realize how key it was. So the UK is rebuilding from the war still, and you can tell their economy is in tatters, and it's really a problem. And without this money, I thought they did a great job of demonstrating how critical it was that the U.S. give them this money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if it was paid back. I would love to look that up, what the details of it were, but I thought I love that historical little nuance.
Yeah, it was just kind of like a fact just slid in there, like as part of this more entertaining episode. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So my last thing that I learned was that I had no idea about Lyndon B. Johnson being so brash. It seemed like an embellishment to me while I was watching it, and you were like, no, he was like that. That's pretty spot on. So I had no idea. Yeah, and then I Googled it, I listened to the tapes. Why don't we hear about that more often?
Isn't that fascinating? Well, I remember when those tapes came out, it was a big deal, and it was entertaining, obviously, to listen to. But I think even politically, there was so much, information that so many people got from that. It's just, history is fascinating sometimes, and those are some tapes that are pretty good.
Yeah.
I've never seen them.
Right.
Are we going to talk about Olivia Colman?
Oh,
the Royal
yeah.
Wave and all that
Yeah,
stuff?
let's
Do you
get
wanna
into
do
that.
now?
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure.
So we've just been consuming so much online about The Crown, obviously, and Brandie and I both found some Crown material that we want to share. So why don't you go ahead? This Royal Wave stuff is spectacular.
I thought this was hilarious. So Helena Bonham Carter told Emmy Magazine that when she and Olivia Colman were portraying their roles and practicing the royal wave, that it's like polishing a very non-round light bulb. So I guess that makes sense.
Is that how I know, their waves were so good.
Yeah, but so I had read this before seeing the second episode, and so I really paid attention when she walked into one of the hotels and she was waving. And I see what she's saying here, but I didn't see that in her wave. Like, she was doing some weird wrist thing.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
And so then Olivia said that she thinks a lot of it is done so it looks right in a still photograph, which I thought was interesting. So you can tell that they're actually waving and not just like have their hand out doing something.
And I guess if you're going like this, it can look odd, but if you're like this.
Yeah, it's always up and elegant
Right,
looks so. I thought that was brilliant. And then Olivia went on to point out, Helena went on to point out that this isn't a documentary, it's an entertainment show. But I guess they had a lot of fun on the set, and Olivia said that she took one of the prop postage stamps. So when we see in the first episode, when they unveil the 2 side-by-side stamps, that she took some of them as souvenirs, which may have been against the rules. But I mean, how great is that to have as a souvenir of like yourself as the Queen of England on a postage stamp?
It's so perfect. I love that. One thing I found, apparently Prince Philip and the Queen, the real ones, have really strong opinions about the crown. So this was an intriguing article in Marie Claire, and it quoted this past interview in The Observer ahead of the season 2 release of The Crown. Matt Smith, who was playing Prince Philip, sat down to talk about his character, described him as being a cool cat. But he said, I don't think he watches the show. And here's how he knows. He said a close friend, who he described as prominent in the film industry, was at a dinner with the royals when Prince Philip asked him, what do you do? Are you involved in that crown thing? I love this. I can see this happening.
I could too.
At the end of the meal, the friend in question supposedly asked, Philip, I'm just wondering, because I have some friends who made the crown, have you watched any? To which the Duke of Edinburgh is reported to have stopped, glowered, and replied, don't be ridiculous. I love that. I can see that happening. I love this part of it. So Matt Smith, not bothered by this at all, doesn't care if it's true or false, or if he watches. He loved portraying the Prince Philip. The Queen, on the other hand, has reportedly watched The Crown on Netflix, loves it, and gives it the royal stamp of approval. According to a senior royal source, Edward and Sophie love The Crown, which is Prince Edward, her youngest son, and his wife, meaning the Count and Countess of Wessex. And apparently it's been this long-standing thing that they go to Windsor on the weekend, they have an informal dinner, and they end it by watching a little bit of The Crown. So if that really does happen, oh my gosh, I love that.
I love that too. I wonder if she sits there and critiques everything that's happening. Like, it wasn't quite like that. I didn't say that. Here's what I said.
Right. Or that didn't happen. Right. How did you not? Right? I love it.
I think that would be so much fun to watch it with her.
It would be. So Sarah Ferguson apparently also has someone in mind who she wants her to play in The Crown, and it's Eleanor Tomlinson.
Did you know who this was?
No, not until I saw the picture.
Did you recognize her?
No. Do you know the show Poldark that she's apparently on? Okay, good. I'm not the only one. Well, she's 27, and Fergie says she would love for her to portray her in her younger years, but she also has a preference on who should portray her in her later years, and that is Julianne Moore. Woo! Who wouldn't want Julianne Moore to portray them?
I like that, yeah.
Love that.
I think those are both good choices. I didn't know who Eleanor Tomlinson was, but once I Googled her, I could totally see the resemblance. I think she'd be great. I hope she's a good actress.
Yeah.
Do you think, well, I guess Fergie would have to be featured pretty prominently.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think she'll be in season 4? We haven't heard anything about.
Well, Diana's in season 4.
Right.
I would think so, because Diana and Fergie were photographed together, and, you know, who knows in real life, but appeared to be very good friends.
Right.
So
Fergie married Andrew in 1986. Do you know when they started dating?
I don't.
We'll look into that.
All right. I gotta think. She's going to be in there somewhere. I don't know if it's going to be this actress, but
yeah,
we'll have to wait and see. Okay,
I
so
think it'll be fun.
You watch the next 2 episodes, and then
we'll talk about it in our next episode.
All right, so we're going to end this Facebook Live. Bye, everybody.
I kind of forgot it was going.